They're not citizens. Enough said.
Moving on. Academic achievement in American schools has remained virtually unchanged over the last 50 years, that's a fact, while funding per pupil has more than doubled, adjusting for inflation, that's another fact. What reforms would you support to improve the education system at the federal level, if any?
At the federal level, get rid of the Department of Education. How's that for a start? Hey, listen, folks, I am not anti-education. I come from a family of teachers. My daughter went back to school, and a couple of Saturdays ago, I was proud to sit in the auditorium of Eternal University and watch her get her degree. Now she can just get a teaching job because they're not hiring a lot of teachers around. So I am not anti-teacher or anti-education. But the more money you spend, we're getting less return for it. Why do we need to destroy the Department of Education? Because it's destroying education. It's that old adage, you know, cut out the middleman, right? Well, what do? We send gobs of money to Washington. Oh, how much of that comes back to the local school district? For every dollar that goes up, do we get a dollar back? No. They got too many levels of bureaucrats that they got to support. If you get rid of the Department of Education, then we don't need that much money up in Washington. That money can stay here locally. And local school boards, local parents can decide what their children learn, what they're taught, and decide what criteria they want to have in place to judge the progress and learning of their children.
What do you think about allowing parents to choose, even in public schools, where their kids go to school, as opposed to being stuck in a district?
Yeah, right. That was my next point.
Because they're called independent school districts. And as you just said, they're run by Washington and the state. You know, the state governments have a lot to say about where the money goes. What do you think about that?
Well, I was about to go to that point. I was pleased to hear that our presumptive nominee, Mitt Romney, in the Republican Party, and if you're a Democrat or an independent, that's okay, came out today in favor of school vouchers. Now, we'll see how strong he holds that. But I was pleased to at least hear that. School vouchers is something we need to have because it returns control of the education process to the hands of the parents, where it belongs. Those children are not the responsibility of the state. They're not the responsibility of the school board. They're not the responsibility of that school district. They are your responsibilities as a parent. And that's where the responsibility needs to be placed back into the hand. And the way you do that is you cut the strings of the money. And you cut the strings of the money by getting rid of the Department of Education. And that way the money stays here and so does the control. Milton Friedman, by the way, was strong, as was Frederick Hayek, two leading economists in free market and school vouchers, said when you do that, you will see the quality of education increase because you'll have what? Competition. And free market, true free market competition always produces better products, better service, better results at a lower price.
Thanks. Conservatives in office give lip service to reducing the size and scope of government. What specific steps can be taken immediately to stop the growth of the federal government? And how would you garner support from other politicians or the people to make sure these changes were adopted? And just give maybe one example.
Okay. The questions I've been asked, no help from the peanut gallery. But folks, I know, listen, I know I kind of go on. I've been told I'm wordy, but I told you I started out as a preacher. But if you take away nothing from our discussion tonight, you will see the passion that I share for our freedom and liberties and Constitution. And you get me going to some of this stuff, and I get worked up, and it's kind of like a train that gets a head of steam built up. I'm kind of hard to slow down, so I apologize if I get going on. But I've been asked the question, you're going to be one person. What can you do? Well, this one person is going to go and find another person that thinks like we do. And we're going to lock arms, and we go and find a third person that thinks like we do, and another, and another. And right now, last election cycle, we sent, what, about 60, 70, what we thought were really conservative, Tea Party type people up there, and not all of them turned out to be that way. Yeah. Well, 60 or so people up there that think that way are kind of like a gnat or a fly buzzing around the head of the leadership. Just kind of annoying. You get 100, 120, 140 of us up there think like that. We're not an annoyance. We're a power that they have to deal with. And so that's how you approach trying to get this stuff done. Now, as far as the out-of-control spending, you said? What
could you do immediately to curb the growth of the government? Because it seems like it just won't stop.
Well, every time a bill comes up, if it has that type of nonsense in it, you vote no. You don't do like our current representative, who is not here tonight, who voted for bailouts, cash for clunkers, voted to raise the debt ceiling.
What would you say to those who say, because I've heard a couple of congressmen I've met with told me that I asked them the same question and they said, well, it's easy to vote no. How would you respond to that?
Easy to vote no. When you have the leadership pressing you, who says, if you vote no, you won't get this. We're going to marginalize you and stick you in the corner. We're not going to let you bring this bill to the floor, whatever like that. Do you know what Ayn Rand said? She made the statement, a comment in one of the articles that she read. Let me back up. She has written a book that I really encourage you to read called Capitalism, The Great Unknown. Has anybody here read that? Is that not a great book?
I think it's called An Unknown Ideal.
An Unknown Ideal. Yeah.
The Unknown Ideal.
The Unknown Ideal. Thanks, man. It is a tremendous book. Now, I do not agree with her atheistic objectivism, but when it came to politics and free markets, she was right on. And here's what she said about compromising like that and giving in and going along to get along. Whenever good compromises with that which is evil, it is always evil that benefits. And look at what we have done, conservatives. When has the left ever moved to the right? It is always those who are on the right, conservatives, who have moved in the direction of the left, and all of a sudden it's hard to tell. Okay, we've got the Democrats and the Democrats light, otherwise known as Republicans. It is hard to say no, because there is going to be undue pressure brought to bear to say yes. And so to saying no is easy. I disagree wholly. I cannot see that. Because you have got to take a stand on principle to say no. Any parent who's ever had to tell their child no, has it been easy? When it's something they really wanted? Or they really put the screw, or really brought the tears on and that kind of stuff? Has it been easy to say no? No. And here we're talking about, I cannot begin to imagine the pressure that it's going to be. But you want to, can I go one more minute?
Yeah, you can go one more minute.
Let me give you the two criteria that I have before me that will be my criteria for any bill that comes up for a vote. Number one, is it constitutional? If any part of it is not constitutional, like the NDAA, that little bit that McCain and Levin slipped in about detention, any part of it's unconstitutional, you vote no. If it is constitutional, my second criteria is this. Will this, if it becomes law, secure, enhance, and further freedom and liberties? Specifically, because it's personal for me, will it enhance the freedom and liberties of Reagan, Caleb, Huey, and Naheem? Because if it doesn't, and I cannot imagine anything constitutional that wouldn't, if it doesn't pass that second criteria, I vote no. Because how could I, who am motivated to go to Washington, not because I want to, because I feel I have to, because I want my children and grandchildren to live as free and prosperous Americans, vote for something that would be detrimental to that goal, and then look them in the eye when they ask, Papa, why did you do this to us? Don't you love us? Can't do it. And so that's how you vote no.
I was going to make a comment. Rand Paul very eloquently stood up in front of on the floor and defended the Constitution and individual liberties. And you can YouTube, if you YouTube Rand Paul with the NDAA, he was one of the few people that stood up, as I'm sure you well know.
Yeah, I saw that.
And challenged the constitutionality of the law in terms of its ability for the U.S. military to detain without charge, without due process, American citizens on U.S. soil and detain them indefinitely.
And the kind of battle that Rand Paul fought is the same type of battle that I want to fight in the House.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our country is in dire need of tax reform.
Mm-hmm.
Half of all citizens of the United States do not pay any federal income tax, and many more are now qualifying for the alternative minimum tax. While countless parts of the code, which is 7 million lines, favor certain parties over others, which is the definition of redistribution. FreedomWorks is promoting a 17% flat tax across the board, which would replace the current tax system in its entirety. What method of tax reform would you support, if any?
I wouldn't support any tax reform. I'm in favor of tax replacement. I do not believe in income tax of any kind, way, shape, or form. Income tax is a method of wealth redistribution. Thomas Jefferson, in his first inaugural address, and I'm sure many of you have heard this before too, made the statement that a wise and frugal government, how many of you have heard this quote I'm about to say? The rest of you have not? A wise and frugal government will not take from the mouths the bread it has earned. A wise government won't do that. Well, what is the bread we have earned? Our income. And a wise government, Jefferson said, will not take it. But that's exactly what the income tax does. So it needs to go completely. And I would support replacing it with H.R. 25, the Fair Tax Act. Now.
Okay, there you go. So that was my next question. How do you generate sufficient revenue to cover the basic services of government?
The Fair Tax Act, which I'm sure many of you all here are familiar with, is basically a national sales consumption tax charged at the retail level only. Everything that we buy has built into it, according to numerous studies, including one in Harvard, Stanford, and a congressional study on taxation in 1997. A 23% cost directly attributable to the income tax, payroll tax, compliance costs with it. And that I know what I'm talking about here because I'm a certified payroll professional. Taxes and benefits, I don't say are my world, they're my nightmare. As you just said, 7 million lines of tax code.
7 million in counting.
Yeah, and counting. It's a mess to have to try and keep straight. Not to mention all the state tax codes.
Yeah.
But what it does, you take that 23% out of everything we buy and sell. Now you take a $100 pair of shoes. It now costs $77. You take that $100 pair of shoes to the cash register and you pay a 23% inclusive tax. And you'll pay $100.10. The difference is, in order right now for you to have that $100 in your pocket to buy that pair of shoes, if you're in the 50% tax bracket, you've got to earn about $133 to $135. So that after taxes are taken out, you've got $100 in your hand to go and buy those shoes. With the fair tax, you earn $135, you take home $135, and ladies, guess what? $35 left over after you buy those shoes, you can now do what? Accessorize.